Landon, your way of doing things is holding this airline back. You're just old-fashioned.
If my old generation stopped for even a minute, your plane would fall like a rock. Let's see if your new generation can handle it. Shut up, you're fired. Stop talking nonsense.
Landon, your way of doing things is dragging this airline backward. Ava Lee said it as she marched straight into the operations center, her voice slicing through the air, sharper than the storm alert screaming across my monitors. No hesitation, no warm-up, just accusation loud, clean, and deliberate. I kept my eyes on the northeast radar, where a wall of thunderstorms was ripping into our busiest corridor. 2 aircraft sat dangerously close to converging, and I was seconds away from correcting their routing when Caleb Thorne, our brand new CEO, stepped in behind her like a silent stamp of approval. He crossed his arms, letting her speak for him, a coward's choice disguised as leadership. Ava didn't pause. Skyward Vista won't reach its future if we allow old generation thinking to linger in critical positions. Old generation, linger, critical positions. Each word intentionally placed, like she'd practiced it in the elevator. And maybe you can feel the sting of those words as clearly as I did. Tell me what emotion hit you first, and where are you listening from right now? The thing about smart viewers is this: you never settle for half a story. You want the whole picture. If that's you, hit subscribe. You'll get every twist, every reveal, and every piece of justice as it unfolds. Now let's move forward to what happened next. 18 years I'd spent in this bunker through blizzards, system crashes, fuel shortages, and crew strikes. 18 years keeping this airline airborne while people like her were still teaching mindset mastery to corporate interns. And now she was telling me publicly that I was a relic. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat. If you want to criticize my methods, at least wait until I finish preventing 2 jets from playing bumper cars over Boston. A few coordinators froze mid-keystroke, pretending not to listen. Even the radar alarm seemed to quiet down, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Ava leaned in with that infuriating, polished smile. See this tone, this rigidity? This is exactly why we need new leadership energy. Caleb finally spoke, though his voice lacked conviction. We're evaluating operational culture. Landon, don't take it personally. Not personally. Right. The truth clicked into place immediately, clean, cold, undeniable. This wasn't evaluation. This wasn't culture. This was preparation. Their minds were already made up. The storm outside wasn't the real threat. The real one was standing 3 feet away, wrapped in perfume, veneers, and a future she believed she understood better than the man keeping her planes in the sky. I didn't react. I didn't explode. I simply nodded, once saving the fire for later, because insults like that don't end the story. They start it. I walked into the conference room with the same steady breath pilots take before pushing through turbulence. I wasn't angry yet. Just quiet. Hollow in a way that felt almost peaceful. Like my mind had slipped into neutral to avoid grinding against whatever was coming next. The room was too bright, too polished, too eager to pretend it understood the weight of real operations. I took my seat at the far end of the table, close enough to hear the nonsense, far enough to pretend it didn't matter. Ava stood at the front, a pastel-colored slide already glowing behind her. The title read, Minimalist Aviation, the Future of Streamlined Flight. Minimalist. As if planes, weather patterns, crew rotations, and federal regulations were aesthetic choices instead of engineering realities. She tapped the clicker, revealing a second slide, a swirl of soft pinks and mint greens, while speaking in that breezy tone people use when they've never been held accountable for the consequences of their ideas. Our industry, she declared, needs simplicity over complexity. Too many systems, too many codes, too many old philosophies slowing us down. Old philosophies, aimed at me without even the courtesy of direct contact. Caleb, standing behind her, nodded the entire time, slow, steady nods, mechanical. Rehearsed, almost robotic. If she had announced that planes should take off without fuel to reduce weight, he would have nodded with the same expression. His face carried that glossy conviction of a man who had never once stayed awake at 3 a.m. to rebuild a broken routing algorithm by hand. Around the table, executives stole glances at me, not openly hostile, not sympathetic either, More like they were staring at a forgotten piece of equipment in a storage room, technically still there but no longer useful. Their eyes slid over me with that quiet, suffocating dismissal that stings far more than open criticism. I stayed still, absorbing it all with a numb calmness that didn't quite reach my chest. Underneath, something tightened. A quiet ache, sharp as a hidden bruise. Halfway through Ava's monologue about reimagining flight paths through holistic intuition, I glanced down the table. One of the younger directors, Evan, was taking notes on his laptop, or so he wanted everyone to think, but from where I sat, I could clearly see the reflection on his glasses a job board for Skycrown Airways. He was scrolling through open roles, clicking into one titled Senior Operations Strategy Specialist. He didn't even bother to hide it. That told me everything I needed to know about the state of this place, not just broken, abandoning itself, quietly, politely, steadily slipping toward freefall. I sat there, keeping my breath measured, my face calm, my posture neutral, because if I reacted now, if I let the hurt rise to the surface, they'd call it resistance or ego or age. So I stayed quiet, and the quiet hurt more than the insult. Most people skim this paragraph, but you don't, right? I knew the moment I stepped into the HR suite that the decision had already been made. The air inside that narrow beige room felt preset, like someone had arranged it hours earlier to make sure the humiliation landed just right. Ava sat across from me with her legs crossed, posture perfect, expression carefully void of anything resembling doubt. Caleb lingered behind her, hands clasped, eyes drifting anywhere except toward mine, proof enough that he didn't have the spine to deliver this himself. Ava spoke first, her voice as cool and polished as a glass conference table. Landon, we've discussed this at length. The airline needs new energy, a fresh mindset. You're simply not aligned with the direction we want to take. Not aligned. Fresh mindset. All the same pastel-coated nonsense she'd weaponized in the boardroom. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my expression still frozen in that tight, almost pleasant smile a person wears when they're seconds away from breaking something expensive, instead of responding. I let out a soft, humorless chuckle, just enough to make Caleb shift uncomfortably. Not enough to be called insubordinate? Ava continued as if rehearsing a script. We're offering you 2 weeks' pay as severance, effective immediately. Standard non-disclosure agreement. We expect full cooperation in transferring your tools and processes. 2 weeks, 18 years reduced to 10 business days, and a stack of papers printed on cheap office stock. My jaw tensed, but I forced my voice flat. 2 weeks, NDA, and you want everything I've built, every tool, every protocol? HR's representative, someone I'd never seen before today, pushed a folder toward me. Sign here, here, and here. Return your ID badge and we'll deactivate your access. Deactivate? As if the airline could function without the very access they were shutting off. For a moment, I just stared at the badge in my hand. The plastic was cracked at the edges. The photo faded. The lanyard frayed where it had rubbed against years of rushed nights and crisis shifts. That badge had been with me through hurricanes, system collapses, fuel shortages, crew strikes moments these two wouldn't survive 5 minutes inside. I lifted it slowly, turning it between my fingers, letting them watch the small gesture with increasing impatience. Then I stood, stepped forward, and placed it neatly on the table right on top of the NDA folder. I guess that's everything you need, I said softly. Ava exhaled, relieved. Good. Then we'll proceed. I paused at the door, forcing them to hear the words before I walked out. You know, I said calmly, the system tends to adapt when key components are removed. You might be surprised how it behaves without me. Ava blinked. Caleb frowned. Neither understood. Good. I left them sitting in that sanitized little room, legs crossed and arms folded, congratulating themselves on their fresh mindset, never realizing they had just pulled the wrong piece out of a very delicate machine, and machines always notice when the wrong piece is gone. I walked out of HR with the same strange calm a person feels after a long dental procedure, numb in all the wrong places, too dazed to register where the real pain is hiding. The hallway outside buzzed with distant chatter, flight updates, small crises rolling forward without me. For the first time in 18 years, none of it required my hands. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow, a kind of quiet so deep it almost rang in my ears. As I reached the operations floor, my screens were still glowing where I'd left them. The storm front had pushed farther inland, the flight paths curling like tangled threads. My replacement, whoever they thought that would be, hadn't shown up yet. Typical. Chaos always arrives early. Competence always arrives late. I sat down one last time, letting the chair groan beneath me. And as my fingers hovered over the keyboard, the past 18 years washed over me, not emotionally, but mechanically, like a checklist I'd memorized long ago. Skylink Navigator. The system everyone thought was just a digital tool had really been a monster I tamed day after day. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't modern, it wasn't intuitive. It survived on patchwork, code bandages, and emergency logic gates I'd stitched together myself. They called it stability. I called it Briggs Protocol because without my fixes, it wouldn't last a single thunderstorm. Funny how no one ever noticed that. With that same numb steadiness, I began gathering all the custom scripts, patches, and overrides, thousands of lines of code written at 3 a.m., hundreds of shortcuts that kept pilots in the air and gate agents sane. Every piece of it went into one directory, my directory, the one locked behind my user credentials, the one tied to my employment status, the one that would vanish the very moment HR clicked deactivate, a self-destruct switch disguised as organization. I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage a thing. I simply moved my tools back to where they technically belonged. Optimization scripts, personal workflow enhancements, legacy stabilizers, they were all, by policy, my responsibility alone. I had followed their rules more precisely than they ever expected. While I worked, Ava wandered into the operations center, tablet in hand, looking pleasantly oblivious. She watched me drag the final script into place and smiled like she'd caught me doing something impressive. "You know," she said, "this is exactly the kind of professionalism we want to encourage. Documenting everything, centralizing it, making it clean. I appreciate you taking the initiative." I nodded slowly, biting back the laugh threatening to escape, just putting everything where it belongs. "Good," she said brightly. "The consultants will love how organized this is." I doubted that, but I kept my face still. Numb calm settling deeper under my ribs, humor curling through it like a thin line of smoke. Ava walked away satisfied, and I stayed seated, watching the scripts settle into their new home, my personal directory, my private vault, my silent exit wound, a neat little trap disguised as courtesy. If you don't understand, don't comment. But if you do, you know what to do. By 3:25. I was sitting at a corner table in the runway bar, a dim little spot a mile from the airport that smelled like spilled whiskey and old secrets. I had ordered a drink I didn't particularly want, mostly because holding a glass made me look like someone who wasn't waiting for a catastrophe to unfold. The bartender flicked on a muted sports channel, unaware that the real game of the evening was about to start on the tarmac at 3:30. The Skylink Navigator system performed its scheduled refresh right on time. Beautifully predictable. The same refresh I had shepherded through 18 years' worth of software decay. Normally, it would reach into my personal directory, pull the scripts, reconnect the logic threads, and realign the flight map like a seamstress pulling together a ripped hem. But today, the directory was empty, and more importantly, the user attached to it no longer existed. The system stretched its digital hand into the void, grabbed hold of nothing, and panicked exactly the way I'd always known it would. I watched the first ripple appear on the flight tracking app on my phone. A single yellow icon blinked, then turned gray, then another. A delay notification flashed across the screen like a shy little spark announcing the start of fireworks. I sipped my drink, amused at how quickly order melted into confusion without my scripts holding the framework together. Within minutes, the departures board began lighting up red across the region. A flight from Chicago suddenly showed awaiting crew confirmation, which was impossible since the crew had checked in hours ago. Another flight swapped its gate twice in under 3 minutes, then a third reported no assigned runway at all, which was either a clerical error or a strong suggestion that it preferred to land on the grass today. The bartender noticed my grin. "Good news?" he asked. "Depends on who you ask," I said. Refreshing the screen again, that's when I saw it. The twist I didn't even have to engineer. Flight SV-219 scheduled to depart for San Diego had just been hit with a bright red delayed warning. That was notable not because of the destination, or the aircraft type, or the crew, but because the passenger manifest publicly listed for VIP transparency showed 2 familiar names, Caleb Thorne and Ava Lee. The universe couldn't have scripted it better. I leaned back in my chair, letting the irony settle over me like a warm blanket. The two people who insisted the airline needed fresh energy were now stuck in a terminal seat, refreshing the same glitchy app they'd mocked me for relying on. I wondered how long it would take before Caleb started blaming the airport, the weather, or the alignment of planets, anything except the decision he made at 3 o'clock. On my phone. More flights turned red, more systems blinked, more delays cascaded like dominoes tipped by arrogance. I lifted my glass in a small private toast to the refresh. I murmured, and to timing. By the time my second drink arrived, Skyward Vista wasn't just wobbling, it was buckling like aluminum foil in a microwave. Everything that had once run on the quiet, invisible logic of the Briggs Protocol was now improvising, which was about as reassuring as watching a toddler juggle knives. The first real sign of collapse popped up on my phone at 3:42. 2 aircraft, both full, both impatient, had been assigned to the same gate, not adjacent, not neighboring. The same exact one. I imagined the gate agents staring at their screens, wondering if the system expected them to stack planes vertically like a modern art installation. 5 minutes later. The pilot group chat, publicly leaked more often than corporate would like, reported 12 pilots whose schedules now showed absolutely nothing. No routes, no assignments, no reason to exist. They might as well have been declared emotionally unavailable by the system. Then came the rapid-fire gut punches, 38 flights delayed in 20 minutes. The departures board must have looked like a Christmas tree wired by a pyromaniac, everything glowing red, blinking, and begging for mercy. I watched delay after delay hit the app, each one a tiny digital confession that Skyward Vista had absolutely no idea where its planes, crews, or sanity had gone. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. Fresh energy, Ava had called it, new mindset. Well, nothing says innovative leadership like mass operational paralysis. Then the FAA stepped in. Anyone who has ever worked in aviation knows the FAA doesn't bother raising its voice. It simply issues a ground stop, the nuclear option of air travel, and once that order drops, everything freezes, planes don't move, airspace clogs, money evaporates at the rate of $50,000 a minute. That's the moment when airlines usually start praying, bargaining, or publicly lying. I refreshed my phone again. Ground. Stop effective immediately. Beautiful. Meanwhile, social media had begun its ritualistic feeding frenzy. A passenger from flight SV402 set up a live stream from the terminal, unleashing a level of profanity that could have melted jet fuel. He waved his boarding pass like a surrender flag, shouting about incompetence, canceled meetings, and emotional suffering. The video hit 2 million views in 30 minutes. Because nothing goes viral faster than corporate failure in high definition, I couldn't help the sharp grin stretching across my face. I didn't engineer any of this chaos. I simply removed myself from the machinery, and the machine revealed exactly how fragile it had always been. Another notification buzzed. More delays, more confusion, more proof that Skyward Vista had built its future on a foundation they didn't understand. I leaned back, savoring the cold satisfaction. If this was their streamlined vision. I almost felt honored to have been the first thing they cut. Almost. Caleb's first call came at 4:02, vibrating across the bar counter like an anxious insect. By the 5th call, the bartender raised an eyebrow. By the 12th, even the buzzing felt tired. I watched his name appear again and again on my phone screen, each attempt more desperate than the last, and an oddly warm satisfaction spread through my chest. I didn't pick up. Not once. Ava switched to texts. Naturally, she always preferred written condescension. Her message arrived with a chirpy flourish. Landon, be the adult in the room. This isn't the time for ego. I almost choked on my drink. After 18 years cleaning up other people's chaos, being told to be the adult by a woman whose greatest achievement was color-coding incompetence felt like peak comedy. I finally responded with a single line. The verbal equivalent of sliding their own buzzwords back across the table. Try using that mindset to get a plane off the ground. Then, I put my phone face down and let the silence do what it does best to amplify panic. 10 minutes later, my voicemail filled like a sinking ship. Caleb's voice cracked through each message, first pleading, then frustrated, then trembling in a way that almost tugged at sympathy. Almost. Ava's attempts were sharper, blaming unexpected system behavior because apparently admitting ignorance violates her personal brand. Meanwhile, Sky Crown Airways, ever the opportunist, caught wind of the meltdown and posted a beautifully passive-aggressive tweet, "A perfect day to have a system that still knows how to function." It gained traction instantly, thousands of likes, retweets multiplying like amused, echoing laughter. I couldn't have crafted a better punchline myself. By then, I could practically envision Caleb pacing the executive floor, hands in his hair, tie undone, demanding explanations from people who barely understood how to reboot their own emails. Ava would be hovering behind him, trying to maintain her influencer calm while the world burned around them. And there I was, nursing a drink, watching the chaos unfold like a fireworks show choreographed by incompetence. Deep inside, a quiet, private satisfaction settled, a warmth I didn't show on my face. I wasn't celebrating their failure. I was simply witnessing the truth finally reveal itself. They wanted an airline without me. Well, they were getting a preview. I leaned back, letting the distant airport announcements drift through the bar like muffled background music. Every delay, every misrouted crew, every confused passenger was a reminder that leadership built on ego collapses faster than code without a foundation. I didn't gloat out loud. I didn't need to. The unfolding disaster was speaking fluently on my behalf, and as my phone buzzed one more time with another desperate call from Caleb, I simply watched the screen go dark. Some lessons, I thought, must be learned the hard way and today. Skyward Vista was finally taking the class, and I let it happen. I knew something had shifted the moment the bar's TV flickered to a breaking news banner. The reporter wasn't talking about delays anymore. He was talking about leadership, arriving at Skyward Vista headquarters under emergency circumstances. That phrase alone told me exactly who had stepped off that black sedan Ellis Thorne. The founder, the real power behind the airline, and the only Thorne who actually understood what a working system looked like. Ellis didn't tolerate excuses. He didn't speak in pastel visions, and he certainly didn't believe in mindset logistics. I could picture him now storming through the glass lobby with his cane hitting the floor like a ticking detonator for the first time all day. I felt a coil of tension tighten in my spine. Not fear, just anticipation. The kind that arrives before a truth detonates. Later, I'd learn exactly how it played out. Ellis bypassed the executive floor entirely and went straight to operations. He didn't ask permission. He didn't wait to be escorted. He simply demanded answers, real ones. And when those answers didn't come, he demanded something else. Where are Briggs's system notes? He never leaves without documentation. That was when Mike, bless the man, remembered the envelope I'd tucked behind the old server logs, the one labeled for emergency use only in red marker. Because subtlety is wasted on the incompetent. Ellis tore it open with the impatience of someone used to dealing with amateurs. Inside, he found exactly what I intended, a printed architecture map of Skylink Navigator, every dependency traced like the veins of a living machine. And below it, the line that mattered more than any other if the sole maintainer is terminated. All logic pathways tied to personal authorization will self-disable to preserve system integrity. In other words, you fire the backbone. The body collapses. Ellis read it once, twice, then once more. Slower, as if absorbing the implications molecule by molecule, and when he finally looked up, Caleb was standing there, pale and sweating through his expensive shirt. Ava hovered behind him, trying to look useful and failing spectacularly. Ellis didn't shout, he didn't flinch, he didn't even raise his voice. He simply turned his head toward his son with a calmness sharp enough to cut steel and said, "You just pushed the bankruptcy button." Son, that was the moment the tension inside me dissolved, not softly, but cleanly, like a knot being cut rather than untied. I felt it ripple through my chest, a surge of quiet power reclaiming the space that humiliation had occupied only hours earlier. My phone buzzed nonstop after that calls, texts, a hurricane of desperation, but I didn't answer. The truth was already out, and I didn't need to lift a finger. My system had spoken for me. Ellis called me just after sunset, his voice carrying the strained politeness of a man who had spent the entire afternoon swallowing the consequences of his son's incompetence. I stepped outside the bar to take it, mostly because I didn't want the bartender hearing me laugh. Ellis didn't waste time. He launched straight into desperation, the kind that wraps itself in business terms but still smells like panic. "Landon," he said, "we need you back." I'll triple your salary. Full authority over every operational system. And Ava is gone the moment you say the word." The wind brushed across the parking lot while I let him speak. For years I had imagined what it would feel like to have my work recognized, respected, valued, yet now, standing there with the airport lights glittering in the distance, I felt nothing but calm amusement. They finally understood the cost of not listening. Or rather, the invoice had arrived and now they were scrambling to negotiate the balance. I leaned against my car, looking up at the faint contrails still hanging in the sky. "Ellis," I said gently, "if I walked back in there, I'd end up doing what I've always done, cleaning up catastrophic decisions made by people who don't understand the system they inherited." I paused just long enough to let the truth settle. "And I'm done being the janitor for your son." The silence on the other end lasted a full 5 seconds, heavy, resigned, and strangely respectful. "I understand," he finally murmured, though we both knew he regretted understanding anything this late after we hung up. I stood there for a moment, feeling an odd sense of relief wash over me. Not triumph, not bitterness, just the cool satisfaction of a door closing the way it always should have. The next morning, while I was making coffee that tasted far better than anything I ever drank during crisis shifts, my phone buzzed with an email from Sky Crown Airways. The subject line read, "Opportunity." The body was short, confident, and blissfully free of buzzwords. They had followed the meltdown closely and wanted to meet by noon. I was sitting in a glass conference room overlooking the runways, shaking hands with the COO of my former rival. They didn't ask for loyalty speeches or miracle promises. They simply said, "We know what you built over there. We want you to build something better here." The offer they slid across the table was 4 times my old salary and came with a title that actually reflected the work I'd been doing for years, Chief Systems Architect. I accepted before the coffee cooled, walking out of their office. I felt that same calm amusement again, a quiet victory that didn't need fireworks or applause. I had left the chaos behind. And for once, the future felt like something I chose rather than something I survived, and somewhere across the city. Skyward Vista was still trying to reboot. It would never succeed without me anyway. 3 weeks after the meltdown, Skyward Vista looked nothing like the polished corporation that had once bragged about owning the future of air travel. The headlines told the story faster than any internal memo ever could. 70% of the airline's assets sold off to cover operational collapse. Hangars, maintenance equipment, regional routes, even their training center gone like loose change slipping through greedy fingers. Watching it unfold felt strangely cinematic, like witnessing a fire from a safe distance while knowing exactly who struck the match. Caleb was the first to fall. Board members removed him in an emergency vote, citing leadership deficiencies, which was a generous way of saying he bulldozed the company into a crater. Last I heard, he tried starting a consulting firm. It lasted 6 days. Ava vanished even faster, deleted every social platform, wiped her photos, and retreated from the internet like a ghost embarrassed by its own haunting. For someone who preached visibility and influence, her disappearing act was almost poetic. Meanwhile, my life had become the calm after a very long storm. On my first official day at Sky Crown, I stood on my apartment balcony, coffee in hand, watching one of our aircraft arc across the morning sky exactly on schedule. Perfect takeoff, perfect timing, perfect proof that competence, not optimism, keeps metal in the air. For the first time in years, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders, not slowly, not gently, but like a pressure valve finally releasing after being held shut for far too long. This new freedom didn't just feel earned, it felt engineered. With my signing bonus, I bought something I'd promised myself I'd get someday when the chaos finally stopped a boat. Nothing extravagant, just sturdy, reliable, and mine. When the harbor clerk asked for the name to paint on the hull, I didn't hesitate. The final landing. It felt right, like closing a chapter that had dragged on long past its final page. That evening, as the sun dipped over the water and another Sky Crown jet soared by on time, I let out a laugh I didn't know I'd been keeping inside. Light, easy, unburdened, the kind of laugh that only arrives when the storm has passed and you realize you not only survived it, you walked away stronger, and with a quiet, satisfied grin. I murmured to myself, turns out the old seat they tossed aside was the only thing keeping them from freefall. When I look back now, The real lesson is simple. Sometimes the moment you're pushed out is the moment you finally take flight on your own terms. If you're listening, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And if this story hit something in you, drop a comment, hit like, share it with someone who needs it. Smart listeners stay for the next journey, so if that's you, subscribe and come with me. The next story begins soon.